Oh, next slide.
Fun time. Sorry about that. Please continue.
All good. Let me dismiss this. We're improvising a lot of this. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, next slide. All right, yeah, so I already told you about SDXD. So we do put events monthly. We're getting into the rhythm of putting events like every month. That's our goal. And we're trying to do between hybrid events and in-person events and online events as well. Next slide. So this couldn't be possible without the help of our amazing board. So thank you, Ben, Melissa, James, Bahar, CJ, and Darren. And also thanks to our amazing volunteers, Yume, Ellie, and Evelyn. And Yume and Ellie are right now hosting the online portion of our event. So thanks to them. And next slide. And she'll be here soon, but we want to say a special thanks to Melissa. She's one of our board members. So Melissa, oh, she. Oh my goodness! What amazing timing! Well, let me tell you a bit about Melissa. So Melissa joined us during the pandemic as an online board member, and she lives all the way up in Oceanside. So it's awesome that she comes down here to these events. And she's been like an instrumental part of SDXD, designing our banners, redesigning our logo. She designed or helped build our website, and she's also been like a really bright light in our in our weekly meetings. So thanks a lot to Melissa. We'll miss her, but we know she'll move up to better things. And platform 11. Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, next slide. All right, so that's not the link, but sorry. Okay, so this is our link tree. If you scan the URL, you'll be linked to all our stuff. So YouTube, website, Instagram, Twitter, everything. So we'll be sure to show that later. Be sure to check out our website. And if you're interested in sponsoring, I'll have Ben say a few words about that.
Thanks so much, Antonio. So first, just want to give a huge shout out to ResMed for hosting us tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. The way we're able to do these is through sponsorship. So if you work at a company that might be interested in hosting us, we would love to talk to you. Go to sdxd.org/sponsor, and yes, I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much, and thank you again, ResMed. Back to you.
Awesome, thanks, Ben. Yeah, if you want to sponsor, please reach out to Ben. Great. Thanks. Well, yeah, so that's our YouTube channel. During the pandemic, we recorded a lot of great events, so please go to the YouTube channel if you want some awesome recordings. Really popular one has been the UX interviews and also resumes, and yeah, so all that stuff is really good. So next one. Okay, so yeah, thanks for our venue sponsor, ResMed. Now we have Dawn to say a few words about ResMed.
Wow, I didn't know you were going to have my photo up there. Thank you everyone for joining. If you are interested in learning more about ResMed, the global UX team, we're going to pop up some links here, I believe. You can follow us on Instagram, and we have a careers.resmed.com website as well as LinkedIn. We have team members across the globe, across 8-9 countries. And this is just kind of where all the different team members are located. At ResMed, we believe in empowering team members to work where they work best. And so today, Andrea is joining us actually from London. So happy to host this sort of virtual and in person and online. Thank you so much. Oh, forgot one more thing, sorry, I didn't want to hog the mic. We will have open positions next year, so if you are interested, please follow the careers.resmed.com. Thank you.
Also done. Thank you. And be sure to check out their website. Here are all the links. And we can go to our next slide. All right, so before we get started, just want to say that after this, we'll continue networking at the Jolly Joker Tavern. It's like 5 minutes away. We'll put this slide again at the end. So if you want to hang out, maybe you found something really interesting that you want to keep talking about, please join us after the event. All right, next slide. Okay, so right after this, Andrea will give a presentation. We'll have a Q&A, so be sure to think of some questions maybe during the talk. We'll try to pass the Slido link if you want to use that. And after that, we'll post network for a bit. And what's our cutoff time down here?
I think it was 7.
All right, we'll try to get out of here by 7:30.
Okay.
Let us know if there's an update.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, next slide. Oh yeah, there's our Slido. So yeah, be sure to scan this link if you want to submit any questions for Andrea. Leave that for a couple seconds. Nice. Okay. See, the phones are down. Okay, next slide. And yeah, today, well, yeah, I would like to welcome Andrea. So,
Andrea,
Should I? Yeah.
okay, I want to make sure that we can hear you. For the in-person side, oh, okay, yes, Andrea is unmuted and she's good to go.
Great. Should I go ahead and get started?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, we have a slide ready for you here. Okay. Feel free
Great.
to get set up. We're ready for you.
Yeah. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Great. All right. Hi, I'm Andrea. Welcome to my TED Talk. No, just kidding. Welcome to my talk. Thank you so much for SDXD for having me. Today, I will be talking about my experience designing for health tech at ResMed. All right, let's get started. Today, I will cover a little bit about my journey into health tech, as well as my key learnings so far about the importance of patient expectations, provider research, as well as the question of delight in health tech, and also some final thoughts about advocacy for good UX in a still maturing design org. So getting right started. A little bit about me first. I studied neuroscience and philosophy at UCLA. However, I absolutely hated being in lab and I did not want to go to med school at all. And if anyone is familiar with STEM tracks, those are pretty much the main 2 options that everyone follows post-grad. So I was high-key having a crisis. However, I knew that I loved creative and project-based work. So I wanted to figure out something that would employ those elements. So cue a whole crisis about post-grad plans and freaking out about not knowing what I was going to do about my future. However, I eventually found UX design and I it really resonated with me, and I decided to learn more by taking a UX boot camp with Design Lab to learn the basics. And then from there, I started taking up contract positions and working for startups. And through all of that work experience, I realized that ultimately I loved health-related projects the most because I was able to tie in my background in STEM and translate that into helping people more easily digest health information and achieve their health goals. So from there, I ended up at ResMed as a UX designer. ResMed basically works in the CPAP space. ResMed makes medical devices, but also has a digital technology arm. And so I work as part of that side of things in both the provider and patient-facing space in digital onboarding. So onboarding patients to therapy, setting them up for success. All right, before we jump into some of my key learnings, I want to go over some aspects that make health tech a little bit different than other industries. So I call this the vibe of health tech. First and foremost, there's a complex web of players. You have, on one hand, patients and their family and friends, and then you also have care providers, such as the hospital, the pharmacy, different specialties like cardiologists, or maybe even your primary care provider. And then aside from all of that, you also have the insurance companies, the payers. These groups oftentimes have different motivations and goals. So one of the main challenges is developing a product that works within this complex ecosystem without alienating anyone. Whoops. Second, healthcare is a super highly regulated field, and for good reason. But that also means that health tech must satisfy some of these non-negotiable rules and regulations. And here is where I have sometimes needed to make sacrifices as a designer to ensure that our product meets any requirements and compliance with the rules and regulations based on different governing bodies across the world. Moreover, because there is such a complex web of players and everything is so highly regulated, healthcare in general moves slower and has a lot of ingrained systems, such as electronic health records. These systems and workflows need to be considered when designing products because there will really only be adoption if it's not too disruptive to existing ways of working. And finally, on the scale of UX maturity by Nielsen Norman, health companies often only have emerging maturity, which is around a 3 out of 6 on that scale. This, of course, isn't true in all cases, but often is true for companies that haven't been digital first from the get-go. And so one of the markers of emergent maturity is this, as quoted by NNG. There are no widespread systematic UX processes in place. There is some managed usability. Some leaders have bought in, and many may advocate for it. But when trade-offs are necessary, UX is still the first to go. UX is not yet prioritized as an essential strategy. So how is it like to work in such a condition? With all of that said, the major draw for designing for health tech for me personally is the high potential for impact. With the rise of health products, hopefully we can bridge some of the existing accessibility and equity gaps that currently exist in traditional healthcare. Moreover, because healthcare is a field that is still being adopted into the digital world, there is a lot of work that has yet to be done to design user-friendly experiences. So there is a lot of room for us to make a lot of impact here. So transitioning to some of my key learnings. First is the patient expectations in health tech. So I want to go through a case study. I freelanced for a startup that was working on an at-home vision field test to streamline patients' optometry visits. So the vision field test is one of many tests you do during an optometry visit, and it tests for the health of your peripheral vision. So a little dot flashes up in the corner of the screen, and you have to press the button to indicate whether or not you saw something pop up. This normally takes about 20 minutes in office, so it adds quite a significant amount of time to patients' visits. And if you consider patients who have to visit the optometrist multiple times a year, it can very quickly add up. So I was brought in to provide suggestions for the user experience of the app ahead of their FDA application process. Because the target user group are those aged 50 plus, I started by running a moderated usability test with around 5 people of varying vision capabilities and provided suggestions based on the findings. So very quickly, what emerged from those tests was this. What I found was that there was a lot of confusion about what they needed to calibrate the screen before starting, and voiced some frustration about how long the overarching process would take. There was clearly a disconnect with their expectation coming into the app, with users saying things like, it would have been nice to know what to have on hand in advance, or how long do we have to do this? It feels like a long time. So as part of the solution that I proposed, I created this standalone instructions page with everything that was needed to be able to set the patient up for success going into the test. So this included a credit card or an ID, as well as some sort of method to cover one eye so that you are testing one eye at a time. For the patients or the users who are curious about why these tools are necessary, I've also included a brief reasoning underneath. So for example, if you're wondering why a credit card or ID card is needed for a vision test, this was because you needed to determine how big your screen is in order to successfully calibrate the test and the results. For those who don't care or care less about the reason why, they could simply skip over this and would be none the wiser. During the user test as well, we ran into some issues where the user was not in a well-lit enough area. So we also included that in the instructions, i.e. where they should be doing this test. And the goal was to mitigate any frustration that would arise due to a high failure rate by not meeting these expectations. So here in the instructions, we very clearly addressed the what, the why, and the where. In addition, we also introduced an additional screen that indicated how long the process would take. So this would basically be an estimation of the time to completion, as well as an explanation of the progress bar that is being used. So this was very much addressing the when. This product is still going through the FDA process, so we don't have any specific results yet. However, we are confident that these changes have led to increased usability simply by providing more information in an easily digestible way to users upfront before they begin the test, ultimately setting them up for success. And so the key takeaway here is that it's important to remember that most digital health products is a means to an end for patients. People don't want to use a health app. They want to fulfill their health goal. If the health app delivers value and shows that they will help people achieve their goal, then that's when people will use it. And while it may not be applicable in all instances, making sure that your product addresses the who, what, when, where, and why, the 5 W's, is key to setting patients' expectations upfront and will ultimately increase overall engagement, adherence, and satisfaction, simply because health can be kind of a scary thing. So having more information can help soothe people's worries. All right, on to my second learning, which is provider research in health tech. So again, because of the uniqueness of health tech as an industry, there are some difficulties when it comes to user research. In an ideal world, we would always be able to test with our target users, right? However, in a heavily regulated field such as healthcare or finance or other regulated fields, where there are really specific laws in place that prohibit people or providers in this case to be compensated for their time, it can be incredibly difficult to recruit the users that you need. And oftentimes this can take a months long process because you have to jump through all of these hoops to make sure that you're not going against any regulations. So what's the workaround? I've learned from some amazing researchers here at ResMed that you should always start from the question, what are you trying to find out? So in discussing this, here's an example of a redesign we did at ResMed last year of our mask selector tool. Basically, this product provides clinicians with recommendations of the most suitable masks for a given patient based on their facial measurements and their sleep habits, as well as their conditions. So in this case, my research question was this: is this redesign intuitive for clinicians to select the best CPAP mask for their patients? I knew going into this, it was going to be very arduous to recruit clinicians. So I wanted to consider some other ways of getting the answers that I need. First, because I was trying to find out how intuitive the workflow is, I needed to ask, does this workflow as it is require domain-specific context? In this case, yes, because this is a specialty product meant for clinicians who would be experts in the CPAP space. So would have all of this background knowledge about CPAP, about patients, and about different types of masks. The next question I asked was, does the UI and content itself require domain knowledge to understand? Also, yes, because if I were to go up to a random person or to any one of you outside of this presentation and ask, hey, do you know what this page is showing? Can you tell me, your thoughts about it? You might be able to give it a guess, but ultimately, unless you're also an expert in the CPAP space, you would have questions about the masks and the patient responses. There would be maybe a little bit of confusion or a little bit of uncertainty. Because this design as is domain specific, I would not be able to get the answers I want about the intuitiveness of this redesign by recruiting non-professionals as test subjects and placing this specific design in front of them. However, this then brings me to my next question. What if I were to modify the contents of this page so that instead of CPAP masks, maybe it showed recommended shoes? Would the workflow still be applicable in a way that is meaningful to me? So as you can see here, I've kind of swapped out some information previously. There was questions about the patient's habits and therapy needs, as well as the mask information. And now I've swapped it to something a little bit more general. So exercise habits, as well as a list of recommended shoes. If I were to put this in front of a panel of regular people, now they would be able to give me insight into the workflow components of this design, such as the check boxes here and the copy button here. Again, I want to reiterate that this is, of course, not ideal. And again, in an ideal world, we'd be able to test with our target users. But in this instance, it would still give me an answer to how intuitive this design is, and I would be able to make iterations based on those findings. So the key takeaway here is that first, you have to be clear on what you're hoping to find out with your user research or your user test. If you're on a tighter deadline or are unable to recruit the target users due to heavy regulations, think about the background knowledge required and the content of the design. and see if you're able to modify it in a way that nonetheless preserves the workflow, but doesn't require domain knowledge so that you're able to use non-domain specific participants. This won't be able to work in all cases, but in the cases where you are able to make these content swaps, hopefully you'll be able to get the answers you need a little bit quicker, and you'll be able to gain confidence that your design works. All right, and now our last learning, delight in health tech. So as UX designers, I feel like we hear the word delight all the time, right? We should make delightful designs. We should instill delight in our users. Let's start by defining delight. So I take the definition by NNG, which is any positive emotion, emotional affect that a user may have when interacting with a device or an interface. I've also included this hierarchy of user needs by Aaron Walters, which is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because I think it illustrates our, some of our goals really clearly. So starting with having the most basics down, the functionality of the product, the reliability of the product, and then on top of that, the usability, and finally at the very top, the pleasure or the delight of the product. So when it comes to health tech, is there a space for this? I've been thinking about this a lot, but before we get ahead of ourselves, here are some common concepts of delight. So here on the left, there is the full gamification, right? This example is pulled from Habitica, which is a habit tracking app that is employing like full gamification. So you play a character in a role-playing game, you collect items, and you can play against your friends like in a typical video game. This encourages you to complete your to-do list and to stay productive. On the right-hand side, I've used the examples from Duolingo that represent examples of gamification elements such as streaks, badges, and rewards. Some might even argue that at this point, Duolingo has reached full gamification as well, but I leave that discussion for another time. Anyway, in either of these contexts, it's clear that the use of gamification increases user motivation by making seemingly mundane tasks more fun and engaging. So bringing this all back to health tech, I think it's incredibly important for us to consider the context. Specifically, in certain instances, health tech may be addressing some serious conditions with patients or users operating from a very, very negative headspace. So referring back to the hierarchy of user needs, in these cases, can a product ever be pleasurable? My argument is that sometimes it's simply not appropriate. When I hear stakeholders say, why don't we gamify the app? Sometimes it can lead to some pretty awkward situations, as illustrated by this meme I made. Why don't we gamify the app? Sir, this is a funeral management product. Yikes, let's not do that. So is all of this to say that in health tech simply can never be delightful? Also no. So instead, I think we should reframe it from adding delight to decreasing burden. Again, thinking of instances where the user may be in a negative headspace and may simply not have the capacity to feel positive emotions. What if instead of trying to make experiences superficially delightful, we design products that alleviate patients' anxieties, stressors, and fears as much as possible? So in the super scientific graph on the left-hand side here that I drew, this is the delta that I think we should be striving for. While there may be a ceiling of how positive users are able to feel going through certain processes, that nonetheless shouldn't deter us from being genuinely supportive with our product by decreasing these burdens patients face. If patients are going through a difficult time, they don't need to be going through a difficult time with our app as well. That being said, my point isn't that we shouldn't have surface level delight either. there absolutely is still room for this, especially if you want to sprinkle in some of your company's brand personality. It just shouldn't be the main focus. The main functionality, usability, and support should be there first. Here are some minor ways that I've included some Surface Delight into projects that I've worked on in the past. So on the left, there is an animation that we included in a somewhat long survey to kind of slow down the patient, give them a chance to breathe. On the right, there are some graphics and icons that we've used to break up text-heavy pages to kind of brighten things up a little bit, while still maintaining that more serious professional tone. So the key takeaway for this is that in serious contexts, designers should reframe from adding delight as decreasing burden, and be extremely cognizant of where users are coming from. And while surface level delight can of course be added, it should really be seen as garnish, right, on a Michelin star meal. Only if the protein, the main meal, is cooked well and plated beautifully does that garnish then add that extra zhuzh at the very end. And finally, in general, how delight is executed should always link back to the user and the product's brand, so that a cohesive and smooth experience is presented. All right, so some final thoughts on design advocacy in a maturing org. Now that we've covered the main points, here are some final thoughts that I have from my experience working in this health tech space with stakeholders who may not be super knowledgeable about what UX can offer. So first is to always link back to the business case. When working with colleagues outside of the design team, such as PMs or other stakeholders, it's important to frame design activities and suggestions in the larger business goal. So while it might be clear to you and me and all other designers out there why doing a user test is an important step of the design process, stakeholders might not understand why resources and time should be spent doing this instead of maybe working with developers towards the launch date. In this case, we might have better luck framing the user test as something to help us gain confidence that our solution addresses user needs so as to increase customer satisfaction. So again, tying back to those key business goals. It's also handy to align on UX metrics and goals with stakeholders at the start of a project. That way, you're able to refer back to them as you make group decisions. So for example, if from the onset, your team establishes the goal of 90% first-time success rate. When trade-offs arise, you can point to the more user-friendly option and argue that this is what will get the team closer to that goal of 90% success. Referring back to these metrics will strengthen your argument and make UX considerations more appealing to the wider audience. Second, I think as designers, we have the superpower of being able to visualize ideas and, as an extension, visualize the future. There have been a couple times where I've done some design exploration and presented a future vision of a product to stakeholders. It helps to have something tangible to point to when we argue for a more seamless experience, for example. These visualized ideas don't have to be what ships in the end at all. However, I found that having something to show stakeholders is incredibly powerful at getting the ball rolling for further investments into UX. In an ideal world, we of course wouldn't have to fight for a seat at the table, right? However, while we still do, visualizing a future ideal state can help demonstrate the power of UX. And through this, I've been able to get multiple stakeholders more invested into the powers of UX. So with that, we're at the end of my presentation. Here are some of my social links. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'd love to chat further. And thank you so much for listening today. I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you so much for presenting. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you. I hope it was informative, and I'm curious to hear people's thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I love that as well. And yeah, please, if you have questions for Andrea, drop it in the Slido link that I just posted in the chat. And I think Andrea is ready for questions in a minute.
Yeah, we already see one that is in there, so get your questions in. We'll give you a couple more seconds. I know it was such a thoughtful presentation with beautiful slides and wonderful information, so give you all a few more moments before we hop right into the Q&A. But thank you all for being here, and another round of applause both online and in person for Andrea for presenting their work. It's really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Okay, we see two. So shall we just kick started with, the first question while folks are still getting your questions in?
Yeah, you could take it away, Yume.
Yeah, okay, so I'll take it here. So Andrea, we have a question from some audience here, and he or she is asking, you mentioned user success. What are some of the unique KPIs you monitor in the health tech space to inform your summative research and refinement? Sorry for that hiccup, but
Yeah, that's a great question. In the CPAP space specifically, some of our super long-term metrics are compliance rate. So whether patients use therapy in the amount that they're supposed to use, and how quickly they get onboarded to therapy. Those are like the ultimate metrics that we keep in mind and we hope to drive with every single product launch and product decision. Some of the more near-term ones include drop-off, which I know is not specific to health tech, but when it comes to surveys or processes that patients have to go through in order to be set up properly for therapy, so as to even begin therapy, that is something that we are looking very closely at. Yeah, those are the main ones that I can think of right now. And apologies if I'm a little bit slow. It's currently 2 a.m. So I feel like I may not be able to think of as many right off the bat. But there is a lot of overlap with any other industry.
got it. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. It's such a late time and we really appreciate it. Yeah, and then I have another question from one of the audience, which he or she asked, who are the stakeholders you focus on when advocating for UX in your orgs, right? So who are like the key contacts that sort of in charge of advocating like in the UX process, specifically in your company or health tech in general?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it really depends on the team structure and the org that you're working in. What I've found that has worked for me is to take some time at the beginning to observe team dynamics and figure out who maybe some of the stronger key players are, and then focus on them and advocating about UX to them. So it really depends, and I work across a couple different teams, so I don't want to specifically, drop names, but I would just recommend that you take the time to observe kind of the interactions that are occurring either in the room or online, and figure out who holds the weight in the conversation, and then first and foremost target those people. But at the same time, when there are chances to present to the wider team, maybe with like marketing and other stakeholders, to again be using and linking what you're saying back to those key business goals. Because at the end of the day, no matter what function someone is in, that is what they're most familiar with.
Yeah, love the answer. Ali, do you want to take over the other questions that the audience have?
Yeah, I could take it from here. We have some more questions rolling in, and I see folks voting and upvoting. Darren's question actually floated up to the top, so I'll take that one, and I'll take Layla's afterwards. Darren's question is, I love the idea of swapping content to enable testing with regular people. What are other approaches to do user research on hard to recruit populations/specialists?
That is a great question, and I wish I was presenting with a user researcher so I could pass this question to them, because they would be able to say a lot. But what I've noticed is, again, coming back to that main question of, okay, what are we trying to find out? Because so much of how you recruit is tied to that main question. So, for example, your target user may have a demographic, may be of, I don't know, 50 plus, right? But if what you're trying to find out through conducting research doesn't necessarily require that specific target population, opening it up to a more general population, wider participants, can help you collect responses faster. So that is just one example, but really it just comes down to what you're trying to find out. And based on what you're trying to find out, what are certain aspects that can kind of give a little bit just to make the research process faster. And again, I just want to disclaim that, this is of course not ideal, but these are some workarounds.
Yes, creatively thinking to problem solve on how to problem solve. I'll take Layla's question next, and I love the more questions coming in. Don't forget that there is networking, and you can connect with Andrea on platforms after this event. So Layla's question was down here. How would you differentiate the experience of working for smaller clients in the health tech versus a larger, more mature company like ResMed?
That's a great question. And I think that ties back to one of the previous questions about dealing with stakeholders. So in a smaller org, in maybe like a startup environment, especially super early stage startup environments, you may be dealing with the CEO, the CTO directly, right? So the amount of people that you have to get their buy-ins from is significantly less. And so therefore, I've found that I've spent less time having to advocate for UX in those instances. Of course, that being said, because the manpower is a lot less in those situations, you have to wear a lot more hats, which is how I found myself conducting user research in those instances versus in ResMed. We have dedicated researchers that I can work closely with to find out what we need to move forward.
Hello? Sorry, I was unmuted for that.
No worries.
Thank you so much for answering that question. I can drop in the next question afterwards. They're all switching or ruing. The question I was just pushed up to the top. Since medical space is highly regulated, does the process often feel slower? And if so, how do you stay motivated as a designer?
Oh, I love that question. Yes, it does feel slow because unlike maybe big tech companies where you have the room to move fast and break things, you really can't do that in health tech, right? Not only because you're dealing with people's health in certain instances, life and death, but also because then the governing bodies are going to come for you for moving fast and breaking things. So there's a lot more oversight involved. And so as a result, especially in larger corporations, we have to make sure that we're playing by the book. How I keep my motivation up despite all of this is ultimately the fact that design is an iterative process, right? Design is really never finished. So even though we might have a finished design for a specific release, there are always additional steps that we want to work towards that are longer term. And so I think for me, the key is shifting focus from maybe the immediate release that is going through all of these hoops and legal and regulatory review, and then shifting to bigger picture thinking, maybe strategizing with the PM about what features make sense, what problems we want to tackle next, and where we want this product to go. So I don't think there's ever a boring moment. It's just a matter of switching your focus from something that is ready for release or ready to be reviewed by legal and regulatory to then something a little bit farther out. And for me, as someone who loves to kind of switch my brain between different things like that, I think it really works well. And I don't really ever get bored.
Speaking of switching your brain between things, we have a question that's asking about the hardware side of tech. In your experience in the digital side and the hardware side of health tech, reread that. In your experience, are the digital side and the hardware side of health tech kept pretty separate in terms of working on UX improvements?
That's a great question. I think we definitely have room to improve in terms of how holistically we are thinking about the user experience. I think in an ideal world, again, I've talked about the ideal world so much today, but in an ideal world, that would we would be employing a service design mindset, right? So no matter the touch point with the patient, whether that be through a hardware device or an app, that holistic story would be considered and would have that sort of seamless integrated feel to it. I think we're working towards that, but I think we still have a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, you are, again, being up at the hour that you are, you're spitfiring, you're going through all these questions. I think that there's another wonderful question that relates to that. Are you working as a full-time digital nomad? If so, which time zone do you usually work in?
I love this kind of switching my brain to a more personal question. Yes, I work fully remote. So I was working from Seattle this past year, but now I just moved to London because I wanted to be closer to Europe to travel around a bit more. I'm currently working hybrid hours, or not hybrid hours, but like modified work hours. So I leave room after 5 p.m. local time to meet with my existing team members. And I do my other half of the day just throughout the typical London working day. I'm still adapting to this new routine, but I'm loving it so far. And huge shout out to ResMed for being so flexible and really allowing us to like follow our dreams in terms of where we want to live. So, yeah.
And shout out to ResMed again for hosting us today, both digitally and in person. Thanks to your hosting, we were able to host wonderful people in person, and thanks to you allowing folks to work remotely, we're able to have Andrea tuning in at the odd hour. Yeah, hopping into one of the next questions that we have here. This question asked, how do you measure CPAP compliance?
How do we measure CPAP compliance?
Yes, CPAP compliance.
Got it. So basically, once patients get their CPAP device, which is like a machine and a mask, they have a certain amount of time to use the device regularly to be then be able to receive reimbursement from insurance. So this is specific to North America. In other direct-to-consumer markets, there is not necessarily this notion of compliance, but in North America, because it is a reimbursement model, so patients have to use their CPAP device for 4 hours a day for, I think, 21 days out of, I think, 30 overall consecutive days. I could be wrong. I blame it on the late hours.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that's the last question. If anybody has any other questions that they want to drop into Slido, it is now the time. If not, don't worry. Please drop your questions into Slido. I want to take this moment to say thank you again to everybody for putting in your questions. As you saw, Andrea appreciated all of them and answered them so beautifully. And I hope you all had an insightful experience tuning in, learning more about how this one to watch, of course, is creatively problem solving in the medical field, exploring the ways that we look at and design delight. And it's been a real honor having you here. So giving folks, again, one more moment, if they want to drop in their question. You might have heard my mouse furiously swiping back and forth to make sure we're getting everybody. And oh, one more question comes in. Andrea, do you ever regret studying neuroscience / philosophy at all?
No, I don't think I do. Interesting question. I'm very amused. No, I think because I was able to very quickly realize that I wasn't meant for working in a lab day in, day out, or working in the medical field, I was able to avoid some of that heartbreak that I think would have happened down the line if I had pursued those. So I love where I am now as a UX designer, and I love that I'm able to use what I've learned in neuroscience and honestly also philosophy sometimes in my work. So no regrets.
And I think that's what we call an innovator, taking their past experiences, paving pathways forward. That's the last question for tonight. And thank you for answering all of them. Thank you, everybody, once again, for dropping them in there. Oh, okay. I'm going to check in with FanCam crew. There's one question that just flew in right now that's being pushed to the top. Do we have time for one more, or should we save it for the networking hour that's about to kick off?
I think we'll save it for the networking hour. But yes, thank you for all the questions. I think that's a good note to end on. So let me.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you again for your questions. And don't worry if you didn't get to answer them, you can either share them, connect with Andrea on LinkedIn and all of their platforms, share them with each other, and of course, bring that creativity and questions to the next SDXD event or to ResMed themselves. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Yume and Eli, for being fantastic moderators.
Yeah, we definitely tried our best. And yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm still inspired, although listening it for the second time.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. Highly recommend anyone who wants to give a talk to reach out to these folks. They're fantastic to work with.
Thank you.
All right, and I have to, when I'm talking, sorry, to Andrea and Yume and Ellie, I have to mute you guys so that there's not like a horrible feedback loop. But yeah, hopefully you heard that applause, and yeah, this is the camera for everyone online to see the audience here. And now you can see yourselves there. All right, so let me turn the camera onto me and make it maybe awkward, but oh wait, there we go. Yeah. Oh no, can you pin somebody else? Maybe not. All right. You know what? I'm gonna face it to you guys. All right, so yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. I feel everyone here was very, very enthralled, and everybody online as well, especially reflected by all the amazing questions that you guys submitted. Super, super interesting. So, and thanks so much for staying up until 2 a.m. On the other side of the world to give this talk. So we're super grateful to have you, and yeah, hopefully you get some rest. And yeah, thanks so much to everyone here for coming. It's so good to see people in person as well, and so many people online. Thanks for our online moderators, Yume and Ellie. Thanks to ResMed, and yeah, we'll show the meeting the location of the bar we're going at after this. Hopefully everybody online got to connect maybe at the beginning. At some point, we may also run like speed networking rooms. And yeah, please stay tuned for our next event. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Ellie. Amazing, amazing. So yeah, thanks everyone again. And we'll just, yeah, good to talk to you soon or in the next few minutes.
Alrighty then, online folks, thank you all for being here. Feel free to connect, log off from your various time zones. And thank you so much once again. Round of digital and in-person applause for Andrea as folks start networking, heading off to Jolly Joker Tavern or to bed. Thank you and have a good night.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.